All right, so we've wrapped up week 3 of the Casey Anthony trial, and joining us again to break it all down and give us some perspective is attorney Felix Vega. Welcome back.
Thanks, Nerissa. Good morning.
Good morning. So this was the week a lot of people tuned into. I mean, we saw a lot of graphic things, heard about a lot of graphic things, the body farms, the heartbreaking pictures of Kaylee Anthony's remains, and this was a tough week for everyone involved, I'd say.
This was, and it really turned into almost like a one long Discovery Channel special all week long with all the evidence that was presented. Like you talked about the body farms, and also seeing Kaylee Anthony's remains. It was the first time that the public and the jury got to see the graphic pictures of her skull, her bones. They heard testimony about how her bones were dragged through the woods and gnawed on by animals. You're seeing there a shot of her T-shirt as it was decomposed and disintegrated. And the jurors are all watching this, and also in the courtroom is also Casey Anthony watching all of this evidence being presented, and her reactions to Dr. G, the medical examiner, and a lot of the other things in the course of the trial really got to her during mostly on Friday when they were doing all that graphic evidence.
Well, we definitely have to elaborate on Casey's reaction, because she was having a lot of trouble in the courtroom this week.
She was, and a lot of people have talked about either on Twitter or on Facebook and have asked me, is she faking it? Is she crying on cue when she comes in the courtroom, when the jury's there, when the jury's not there? And I think one of the most visible signs of her reaction was, I think it was on Friday, when she actually started to get up and appeared to be having a panic attack of sorts. And again, the jury's watching all of this in the courtroom, and it's hard to gauge if she's actually reacting because she believes that she's guilty, or if she's reacting because she believes she's innocent, or, like we brought up earlier, is she faking all this for the jury, and is it all a show in the end? And
that's what the jury, it's up to them to decide and make that opinion.
Right, exactly.
Because everyone else has formed their own opinion.
And everyone's formed their own opinion, and it's very hard for them to not look at her in the courtroom, but in the end, they have to focus on the evidence, and they have to get to the issue of premeditation. If you take a look at this graphic we have regarding premeditation, it's the last part there that really the jury has to focus on, it, whether or not the conduct of the accused will convince them beyond a reasonable doubt of the existence of premeditation at the time of the killing. And that's what really they need to focus on. We heard from Dr. Jan Garavaglia, who was the medical examiner. She went through a lot of detail about whether or not this was a homicide. She relied on 3 things: the duct tape, the fact that no one called 911, and the fact that the bones in her body was discarded in the woods. That's the manner of death, which is homicide. Now, the cause of death is something completely different that she was not able to form an opinion on. The prosecutors threw out their opinions about chloroform and really focusing on the duct tape being the murder weapon in this case. There's still a connection the jury needs to make from, is that woman sitting in the courtroom they're watching guilty of first-degree murder based on the evidence alone? Okay,
we got to get to my Facebook page and see what viewers are asking. So I think we have some questions here we can pull up. Here we go. This is from Jeanette Sanderson. How could Friday's testimony not break Casey into a confession?
She has the right to remain silent all the way through this trial, and she does not have to testify. She gave all the various statements that we heard about in the beginning of the trial, but right now she can just sit there and do absolutely nothing. She may be reacting, as we saw, but whether or not she takes the stand is still going to be one of the million-dollar questions in this case, and she doesn't have to. She doesn't have to say another word until this is all over with.
Okay, and let's go to another question here. This is from John Public. Have there been any issues with Casey's demeanor in court? We're talking about her reaction
Obviously, we've seen her demeanor has been a big part of what's going on in the courtroom. However, the judge is the one that has to determine if it's becoming a distraction to the jury based on their reactions and based on her actions. Other judges anywhere have used means of closed-circuit television. They remove the defendant from the courtroom and let them watch on a monitor. Some judges will physically restrain the defendant if they have to and admonish them, do not react. You need to keep your client in check. We haven't seen Judge Perry do that yet, so I don't think it's become that big of a distraction for the jury. They're honed in on the witnesses and the evidence at this point.
All right, and on that note, we have another one. I think we have time for one more. John Roosh here says, will the insanity defense be used to keep Casey away from the death penalty? Is that what they're going for here? I think
this is a good question. Sorry, this is a good question. That the death penalty or the issue of insanity has not been raised in the course of the trial. Now, as we've talked about, there's 2 phases to the trial: guilt phase, which is what we're in right now, and the death phase or the penalty phase, which will come only after Casey Anthony is convicted of first-degree premeditated murder. They'll address some of her mental conditions, her mental state at that time if we get to the penalty phase in this particular case. But right now, no insanity has been raised, and they're sticking with their story about the accidental drowning at this point.
All right, it's a talker, but we have to stop it there. So thank you, Felix Vega.
Thanks for having me again, Nerissa.
And we'll be having you next week as well to
Sounds good.
break it all down.
Yep.
Okay, on to other news right now.